Guy, have you heard of Richard Nixon's Mad Men policy?
No, I remember the series Mad Men, but not the policy, no.
No, this was. You remember when Nixon was in power? We were almost in the height of the Cold War back in the 70s. His erratic behaviour, because he was quite erratic in terms of how he spoke as to how he'd use American weaponry and what have you. His erratic behaviour was supposedly a policy that he put together of appearing to be unhinged, so that the opposition, as well as the Russians in those days, would be cognizant of that and wary of doing anything untoward, not knowing what he'd actually do in response to it. It was all a policy. I mean, obviously he was impeached in the end and booted out. But during his international negotiations, that was the policy that he adhered to. He also got rapprochement with what was the name of his Secretary of State? Begins with a K. He went to China.
Kissinger.
Kissinger, that's right. He also got rapprochement with the Chinese at that point. So the Chinese and the Americans were in lockstep, and the Russians were outside this little party. So it worked to a degree. The reason I'm taking us back to the 1970s is there's a suggestion that this is what's happening at the moment with Donald Trump. There's two schools of thought here. One is that there's a direct policy from Trump of trying to behave in an erratic manner to keep his enemies, both internal and external, off balance. And there's the other group, the Democratic group, I would suggest, and the people on the other side of the coin who say that he's going nuts. Where do you stand on that? Have you a thought on that?
I'm not sure about going nuts. I think he probably is nuts. How far back do you want to go? But if you just take what's happening now, the fact that he doesn't seem to sleep, does he? He sends his truths out by the bucket load all day. The statement I think that very few people will ever forget is the suggestion is that he would wipe out an entire civilization, and that would be a shame. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how far back, how much more you need to look at when you look at that statement.
I mean, that was in the same statement that I've got here that he started that up with open the bleep, bleep, bleep straight, you crazy bleep, bleep, bleeps, or you'll be living in hell. Quite a bizarre statement, as you said, for a sitting president to be making, isn't it?
Yeah, and the latest headline, which has just popped up as we're recording on Thursday at 3 p.m., is he's just ordered a shoot-to-kill order in the Straits of Hormuz, which presumably is for Iranian vessels. Well, there's supposed to be a ceasefire, isn't there?
There is meant to be a ceasefire, yeah. He meant to have been extending that. Initially, they were talking about it being open-ended, weren't they? But then yesterday, it was suggested it was going to be 3 to 5 days. I don't think anybody knows quite what's going to happen at the end of that. I mean, we'll come on in a minute to an update, I guess, on what's happening in the Gulf. But in terms of some of the other things that he's said over the years, this talk about invading Greenland, which I noticed we popped back to a few weeks ago, didn't we? We're talking about that again. And he's also had these bizarre press conferences where he's wandered off focus completely. When he was talking to somebody about, this thing in the States where they're not taxing tips. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
Well, he had a staged event with McDonald's, obviously, at the White House. And one of the assistants that he had there, one of the servers, I think they call them in the States, don't they? The guys and girls who stand behind the counters. He turned to her and started talking about his feud with Pope Leo, because, of course, that's the other thing. He's taken the Catholic Church on in the last week. Have we spoken since then? I don't think we have.
I think we spoke about it last week, yeah.
He's taken the Catholic Church on. But he asked this server whether she approved of transgender women in sports. Just a bizarre, you go in there supposedly thinking you're going to represent McDonald's in terms of tips, and then you've got the president asking you about major policy decisions.
Wow. Yeah, we could just list 100 things. I think one of the most bizarre things was when towards the end of Elon Musk's days, Musk brought 3 or 4 Teslas outside the White House, and then Trump, live on TV, bought one of them. It's just crazy. I mean, the whole thing is bonkers.
It is crazy. He's been accused of suffering from a condition called malignant narcissism. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you out some of the symptoms of malignant narcissism.
Oh, okay.
And see whether you feel that whether we give it a tick or a cross.
Okay, tick or a cross. Right. Okay.
Tick or a cross. So first one is extreme grandiosity and entitlement, a deeply ingrained belief that they are superior, special and entitled to special treatment, often far exceeding standard conditions. So what do you think? Extreme grandiosity and entitlement, tick or a cross?
Tick. Yeah.
Tick. Now, next one's interesting. Sadistic cruelty, taking active pleasure in the physical or emotional suffering of others, going beyond mere selfishness to intentional cruelty. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, the statement about wiping out a civilization.
I'm going to have a question. Abstract? I'm going to sit in the middle on that one. I haven't seen the evidence of it.
Right.
But I believe it could be true.
Right. Antisocial behavior and paranoia, a disregard for laws and social norms, often combined with paranoid beliefs that others are out to harm them, justifying their own destructive behavior.
I think that's a tick.
That's a tick, yeah. Profound lack of empathy, a complete inability or unwillingness to recognize, understand, or care about the feelings, needs, or rights of others.
I think that's a depends. I think if you're with him, then I think you get a lot of empathy. But if you're against, I don't think you get any.
He hasn't had a lot of empathy for the Prime Minister of Spain, for example, has he, fairly recently?
No, or indeed our own Prime Minister.
No.
So I think that's both a tick and a cross, depending on what side of the divide you're on.
Manipulative and exploitative behavior, utilizing deceit, charm, and coercion to manipulate others for personal gain, frequently treating people as tools rather than humans.
Probably, yeah.
You can't keep sitting on the fence, guys. It's got to be a tick or a cross.
No,
otherwise...
I think I have. I think there's only been one where I've been in the middle. Yeah.
Intense paranoia, developing unfounded suspicions, accusations, and distrust of others to justify preemptive strikes or retaliatory behavior. Yeah, I mean the business with the election, the 2016 election, and preemptive strikes in terms of taking revenge on all those people he thought or he perceives as having worked against. Look, poor old John Bolton. He's up on charges of having. It seems to me all these politicians seem to supposedly take these documents home with them, don't they? And keep them in their back drawer or what have you. And well, that's the next one, really. Revengeful aggression, reacting to minor slights or criticism with intense, disproportionate rage and long-lasting, brutal revenge.
Yes, I think that is definitely a case.
Need for total control, a driving need to dominate, control, and oppress partners, employees, or family members through fear and coercion.
I'd say probably.
Okay. Pathological lying and deceit. I don't have to explain what that is, do I, really? That, I think, pathological liar, I mean, he just constantly, but whether he believes what he's saying or not is...
Sometimes I don't even think they're lies. I think they're just stories. It's difficult to put it into words because you don't believe it yourself. And you think, crikey, he's just said that. Like wiping out a civilization.
Yeah. But he says things that are immutably untrue, doesn't he, on occasions as well, that are just like more in terms of economics. I mean, I heard him saying the other day that there's no inflation in the States, for example. There is no inflation. He must, well, one would hope that he'd know that that's just nonsense, just utter nonsense.
Yeah, because, everything's the best in the world, best as ever been, everything. Yeah.
And finally, interpersonal destructiveness, a consistent pattern of ruining relationships and leaving others devastated, frequently boasting about the destruction of past partners or colleagues.
Well, he does have a lot of form about changing his colleagues, that's for sure.
Kirsty Nome, she'll know all about that. And Pam Bondi, he seems to have had a clearing out. And this guy, Patel? Is it Kish Patel or the guy who's in charge of the FBI at the moment? I don't know whether you've heard the stories of him over the last 2 weeks, that he is overcompensating for the fact that he's worried that he might be next on the list to be hoiked out. He's come up with all these different people who supposedly evidence that the 2016 election was rigged against Trump to try and effectively please his master. So we shall see what happens. So overall, then, which camp are you in? Are you in the camp that says it's just his manner? He's a madman. He's the Nixon type of character, or are you in the camp that says he's partially nuts?
I think he's eccentric is the way I would look at it. I don't know what the clinical diagnosis would be, but I just think he's eccentric to the extreme. And I don't think he knows what he is most of the time.
I'm not going to get you off the fence, am
I? I don't know. Genuinely, if we're actually saying nuts, I could live with that along with eccentric. I just think he is. He's just an element of fascination, isn't he? And if he wasn't the leader of the most powerful country in the world, or one of them, it would be fun, but it's not fun.
No.